The air in Accra was thick with the smell of diesel and roasted plantain as Adwoa Mensah stepped out of St. Mary's Hospital. It was past 11 p.m., and the streets buzzed with Okada riders weaving through traffic, their headlights slicing through the dark. Her white uniform clung to her skin, damp from sweat after a 12-hour shift. Her feet ached in her worn-out sandals, but her day wasn't over yet. She dragged herself to the Trotro stop, the dim glow of street lamps casting long shadows on her tired face. She pulled out her old Nokia phone, its cracked screen flickering as she dialed her mother's number. The line crackled before a faint voice answered. "Adwoa, my daughter, is that you?" "Mama, how are you?" Adwoa asked, forcing a smile though her body screamed for rest. She heard a cough, weak and raspy, before her mother replied, "I'm managing, The body is weak, but we're alive. Your brothers and sisters are sleeping. Thank you for the money last week. It paid Kofi's school fees." Adwoa's heart lifted slightly. "Tell them to study hard, Mama. I'm sorry I couldn't send more. This month's pay was small, but I'll make it up soon. Don't kill yourself with work, Adwoa," her mother said, voice trembling with worry. "You're all we have, but I hate that you suffer for us." "I'm fine, Mama," Adwoa lied, swallowing the lump in her throat. She wanted to scream about how tight things were, how she skipped meals to save Sadie's, how the landlord's threats echoed in her ears, but she held back. "How's Kwame? His girlfriend?" Her mother sighed heavily. "That boy. The girl's family wants marriage now. She's pregnant, Adwoa. I told them we have nothing, but Kwame doesn't listen. He's still in school." Adwoa's stomach dropped. "Pregnant? Oh, Mama, don't worry. I'll save up for the wedding and her checkups. We'll manage." "Adwoa, you're too good to us," her mother whispered. "Take care, The Trotro is coming." "Yes, Mama. I'll call soon." She hung up as the rusty minibus screeched to a stop. She climbed in, squeezing between a trader with a basket of yams and a loud-talking man on his phone. Her mind spun, Kwame's mess, Mama's cough, the bills piling up in Kumasi. She was 26, but she felt like an old woman carrying the world. When the Trotro dropped her near her rented room in Nima, a cramped corner of an old compound house, she froze. Chains wrapped around her door, a heavy padlock glinting under the flickering bulb. Her heart sank. She banged on the landlord's door, her knocks sharp against the silence. Madame Aku, a stout woman with a wrapper tied tight and gold bangles jangling, opened the door, a half-eaten piece of kenki in her hand. "What's this noise, Adwoa?" "I'm eating." "Why's my room locked?" Adwoa asked, voice shaking. Madame Aku rolled her eyes. 3 months, no rent. You think this is a charity? Our deal was clear, pay or leave. I've waited long enough. Please, madam. I sent money home. Give me 1 week. I'll pay everything. Adwoa begged, her throat tight. No more promises. Madame Aku snapped. Your things are outside. Take them before morning or I burn them. She slammed the door, leaving Adwoa stunned in the humid night air. Adwoa stumbled to the side of the house, her breath catching as she saw her life in a pitiful pile. A battered suitcase, clothes stuffed in a plastic bag, a thin mattress rolled up with a faded blanket. She sank beside it, the damp ground seeping through her uniform. Tears stung her eyes, but she clenched her fists, refusing to cry. The night was alive with crickets and distant high-life music, but she felt utterly alone. Kumasi was hours away, and her purse held only 10 cedis, barely enough for a meal, let alone a bus fare. The hospital had strict rules, no sleeping in the wards. She scrolled through her phone, hands trembling, until she stopped at Efua's name. Her best friend, her lifeline. She dialed, praying. Adwoa. Efua's voice was groggy, thick with sleep. What's wrong? You sound like a ghost. Efua. I'm sorry to wake you, Adwoa whispered, voice cracking. I've been evicted. I'm on the street with my things. Can I stay with you? I've nowhere else. Oh my God. Evicted. Efua gasped, instantly awake. Stay there, Adwoa. Don't move. I'm telling Papa we'll come get you. You can't carry all that on a trotro. Efua. I hate troubling you. Adwoa started, but Efua cut her off. Stop it. You're no trouble. Just wait. The line went dead. Adwoa hugged her knees, the drizzle starting to fall, soaking her hair. She stared at the muddy street, the neon signs of a nearby bar flickering. She felt small, broken, but Efua's words sparked a tiny flame of hope. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. 30 minutes later, headlights pierced the rain. An old Toyota pickup rattled to a stop, its engine coughing. Efua jumped out, her wrapper loose, her braids swinging as she ran to Adwoa. "Adwoa, look at you, wet like a drowned goat," she cried, pulling her into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry," Adwoa sobbed, clinging to her friend. "I'm ashamed, Efua." "Shame for what? Come, let's go." Efua's father, Papa Kofi, a wiry man with a kind smile, climbed out and grabbed Adwoa's suitcase. "No walla, my girl. You're welcome in our house." They loaded her things into the truck, the rain drumming on the tarp. Adwoa climbed in beside Efua, the warmth of her friend's hand on hers chasing away the chill. As they drove off, she glanced back at the chained door, a chapter of her life slamming shut. Fan 1C. A new shelter, the Boateng house, sat on a dusty lane in Teshi, a modest concrete block with a tin roof and a mango tree out front. Inside, Efua's 3 younger siblings sprawled on a mat in the living room, snoring softly under a faded blanket. The air smelled of palm oil and charcoal from the kitchen. "Come, you'll sleep in my room," Efua said, leading Adwoa down a narrow hall. The room was small, a single bed, a wooden stool, an electric fan whirring lazily. They dumped Adwoa's things in a corner, the suitcase scraping the cracked floor. "Have you eaten?" Efua asked, hands on her hips. "Yes, at the hospital," Adwoa lied. Her stomach growled, but she couldn't burden them more. Efua squinted. "Liar, we've got bread and groundnut paste. I'll fetch it." "No, I'm full," Adwoa protested, but Efua waved her off and disappeared. She returned with a plate, shoving it into Adwoa's hands. "Eat, or I'll spoon-feed you like a baby." Adwoa laughed weakly, taking a bite. The bread was stale, but the paste was rich, grounding her. She sank onto the bed beside Efua, the weight of the day crashing down. "Efua, I'm so tired," she whispered, tears spilling. "It's like problems never stop, Kwame, Mama, the rent. I can't breathe." Efua pulled her close, her voice soft but firm. "You're not alone, Adwoa. Me, Papa, Mama, we're here. You're strong, but you don't have to carry it all." Adwoa nodded, her sobs quieting. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of peace. Efua's family wasn't rich. Papa drove a taxi. Mama sold wache at the market, but their warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. She wasn't home, but she was safe. The next morning, the sun blazed over Teshi, painting the tin roofs gold as Adwoa and Efua trudged towards St. Mary's Hospital. The streets hummed with life, market women balancing trays of oranges, schoolboys kicking deflated footballs, and the sharp honks of taxis slicing through the chatter. Adwoa's uniform felt stiff against her skin, still damp from a quick rinse in Efua's bucket. She carried her small bag, her shoulders slumped from a restless night on the thin mattress beside Efua's bed. The bread and groundnut paste sat heavy in her stomach, a reminder of her friend's kindness. But her mind churned with worry, Kwame's pregnant girlfriend, Mama's cough, the Sadies she didn't have. Efua nudged her, her voice bright despite the early hour. "Adwoa, you're quiet like a mouse today. What's eating you?" Adwoa forced a smile, her lips trembling. "Just thinking, Efua. Too many things at once. I don't know how I'll manage." "You'll manage because you're Adwoa Mensa," Efua said, tossing her braids back. "The strongest woman I know. We'll figure it out together." Adwoa nodded, clinging to Efua's words like a lifeline. They stepped into the hospital, the cool air hitting them as the smell of antiseptic stung their noses. Nurses darted between wards, their footsteps echoing on the tiled floors, while a doctor barked orders over the intercom. Adwoa clocked in, her hands shaky as she signed the logbook, when a sharp voice cut through the bustle. Well, if it isn't the homeless queen herself," Nkechi Okoro sneered, leaning against the nurse's station. Her uniform was crisp, her nails painted a bold red that clashed with hospital rules. She smirked, her eyes glinting with malice. "Heard you got kicked out last night, Adwoa. What's next?" "Begging on the streets." Adwoa's chest tightened, heat rising to her face. She gripped the pen, her knuckles whitening, but kept her voice steady. "Good morning, Nkechi. Can you pass me the ward chart?" Nkechi laughed, a harsh, grating sound that drew glances from other nurses. Oh, listen to her, acting all proper. You think you're better than us, don't you? Poor little Adwoa, always playing the saint. She tossed the chart onto the counter, letting it slide toward the edge. Fetch it yourself. I don't serve charity cases. Efua stepped forward, her eyes flashing. Nkechi, why don't you shut that big mouth before I shut it for you? Adwoa's twice the nurse you'll ever be. Nkechi's smirk faltered, but she squared her shoulders, her voice dripping with venom. Careful, Efua. My uncle's the head of this ward. One word from me, and you're both scrubbing toilets instead of beds. Adwoa grabbed Efua's arm, pulling her back. Leave it, Efua. She's not worth it. Her heart pounded, a mix of anger and shame swirling inside her. She bent to pick up the chart, her fingers trembling as Nkechi's laughter rang in her ears. She'd known Nkechi for 2 years, ever since they started at St. Mary's together. But the woman's hatred had grown like a weed, choking out any chance of peace. It started when a junior doctor, Dr. Mensah, had smiled at Adwoa during rounds, asking her for coffee. Adwoa had brushed him off. She had no time for romance. But Nkechi, who'd been eyeing him for months, never forgave her. As they walked to the ward, Efua muttered, That girl's a snake, Adwoa. She's jealous because you're good at this. Patients love you. Doctors respect you. She can't stand it. I don't want trouble, Adwoa said softly, her eyes fixed on the floor. I just want to do my job and go home. Well, to your home now. Efua squeezed her hand. You'll have your own place again soon. Nkechi can't break you. But inside, Adwoa wasn't so sure. She felt fragile, like a clay pot cracked from too much heat. Every insult from Nkechi was a hammer blow, chipping away at her resolve. She'd come to Accra with dreams, finish nursing school, lift her family out of the dust of Kumasi. But now she was barely holding on, a thread stretched to snapping. They split up for rounds, Adwoa heading to the general ward. She moved between beds, checking drips, adjusting pillows, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. A young boy with malaria smiled at her, his feverish eyes brightening. Sister Adwoa, you're back, he rasped. Yes, Kofi, I'm here, she said, brushing his forehead with a cool cloth. His trust steadied her, a small anchor in the chaos. But as she turned to the next patient, Nkechi's voice slithered through the ward again. Adwoa, you missed a spot on that drip. Can't even do the basics right. Nkechi stood by the door, arms crossed, her red nails tapping. A few nurses glanced over, their silence heavy. Adwoa's jaw clenched, her pulse racing. She wanted to scream, to fling the tray at Nkechi's smug face, but she swallowed it down. I'll check it, she said, her voice tight as she moved to the drip. It was fine. Nkechi was lying, stirring trouble for sport. The ward buzzed with tension, the air thick with unspoken words. Pathetic, Nkechi muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. No wonder you're broke. Can't even keep a roof over your head. The words hit like a slap, sharp and stinging. Adwoa's hands froze on the drip line, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. She saw her mother's tired face, Kwame's reckless grin, the chained door in Nima, all piling on her shoulders, crushing her. She wanted to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. This was her life now, endless work, endless taunts, endless weight. Efua appeared at her side, her whisper fierce. Don't let her win, Adwoa. You're better than this. Adwoa nodded, blinking hard. She straightened, forcing her hands to move, her voice to steady. Nkechi, if you've got time to talk, maybe help with the patients instead. It wasn't much, a quiet defiance, but it was all she had. Nkechi scoffed, turning on her heel, her laughter trailing behind her like smoke. Adwoa watched her go, her chest aching with a mix of rage and exhaustion. She didn't know how long she could keep this up, pretending she was strong, pretending she could bear it all. But as she turned back to the boy, his small hand reaching for hers, she knew she had no choice. She'd fight even if it broke her. The ward settled into an uneasy hum after Nkechi's departure, the air still crackling with her venom. Adwoa moved through her tasks like a shadow, her hands steady but her mind a whirlwind. The boy, Kofi, clung to her fingers as she adjusted his drip, his small voice whispering thanks. She smiled at him, a fragile mask over the ache in her chest. Every step felt heavier, every breath a battle against the tears she'd locked away. Nkechi's words, homeless queen, pathetic, looped in her head, sharp as thorns. She wanted to prove them wrong, to rise above, but doubt gnawed at her. What if Nkechi was right? What if she was just a failure pretending to be strong? The morning dragged on, the hospital's rhythm a blur of beeping monitors and hurried footsteps. Adwoa was checking a patient's chart when a commotion erupted down the hall. Shouts. The clatter of a tray hitting the floor, a deep voice barking orders. Nurses scattered like startled birds, their whispers buzzing through the ward. "It's him," one said, eyes wide. "Chief Owusu Dankwa. He's here." Adwoa froze, her pen hovering over the paper. She'd heard of Chief Owusu, a big man from Lagos who'd built an empire of hotels and palm oil plantations across West Africa. His name carried weight, his wealth a legend, but so did his temper. Stories floated through Accra like smoke. Drivers sacked for being a minute late, maids trembling under his glare. Now he was at St. Mary's, and the air shifted, thick with dread. Efua rushed over, her braids bouncing, her face a mix of excitement and fear. "Adwoa, you won't believe it. They've put him in the VIP wing. The whole hospital's shaking, doctors running, nurses hiding. They say he threw a jug at someone already." Adwoa's stomach twisted. "Who's with him?" "Nkechi?" Efua said, her lips curling into a sly grin. "Let's see how her big mouth handles that." Adwoa didn't laugh. She pitied Nkechi, despite everything. No one deserved a patient like that, not even her. She turned back to her chart, trying to focus, when a scream pierced the air. It was Nkechi's voice, shrill and furious, echoing from the VIP wing. Adwoa's head snapped up, her heart racing. Nurses peeked from behind curtains, their whispers growing louder. Moments later, Nkechi stormed into the ward, her face flushed, a red mark blooming on her forehead. Her uniform was damp, water dripping from her sleeve. She clutched a tray, her nails digging into the metal, and her eyes blazed with rage. "That old man!" she shouted, slamming the tray onto the counter. "He threw a cup at me because the water wasn't cold enough. Who does he think he is?" The ward fell silent, all eyes on Nkechi. A few nurses murmured sympathy, but most stayed quiet, their fear palpable. Adwoa watched, her breath caught in her throat. Nkechi's arrogance had crumbled, replaced by a raw, trembling fury. For a moment, Adwoa felt a pang of satisfaction. Nkechi's pride had met its match, but it faded quickly. She knew what it was like to be broken down, to feel small. She stepped forward, her voice soft. "Are you okay, Nkechi? Did it hurt?" Nkechi spun on her, her glare venomous. "Don't you dare pity me, Adwoa. What are you staring at? Enjoying this?" She shoved past, nearly knocking Adwoa into a bed. "You're all useless." Efua grabbed Adwoa's arm, pulling her back. "Let her go. She's a fool to think she could boss a man like Chief Owusu around." Adwoa nodded, but her eyes lingered on Nkechi's retreating figure. The mark on her forehead, the tremble in her hands, it was real pain, not just anger. She hated Nkechi's cruelty, but she couldn't celebrate her humiliation. It wasn't right. The day stretched on, the hospital buzzing with tales of Chief Owusu. One nurse said he'd cursed her for fluffing his pillow wrong. Another claimed he'd demanded a new bed because the sheets weren't silk. Adwoa listened, her unease growing. She'd escaped his wrath so far, but in a place like St. Mary's, luck ran thin. She prayed silently, "God, keep me far from that man." That evening, as Adwoa and Efua changed in the locker room, the door burst open. Efua stumbled in, her face pale, her hands shaking. Adwoa dropped her bag, rushing to her. "Efua, what's wrong?" Efua sank onto a bench, her breath ragged. "It's him, Adwoa. I was assigned to Chief Owusu this afternoon. He cursed me out, called me a filthy village girl. Said I poured his tea like a donkey." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. "My own father doesn't speak to me like that. I'm a nurse, not his slave." Adwoa knelt beside her, her heart twisting. Efua, bold, cheerful Efua, looked shattered, her spirit crushed under the old man's words. "Oh, Efua," she whispered, wrapping her arms around her friend. "Why did he do that?" "The tea was too hot," Efua said bitterly, wiping her face. "He shouted it in front of everyone, nurses, doctors, even a janitor. I wanted to throw the cup back at him, but I just stood there, shaking. He's a monster, Adwoa. Adwoa held her tighter, anger flaring in her chest. She pictured Chief Owusu, his wealth, his power, tearing into her best friend like she was nothing. You didn't deserve that, she said fiercely. None of us do. Efua sniffed, forcing a weak smile. At least I didn't get a cup to the head like Nkechi. Small mercies, eh. Adwoa managed a laugh, but it was hollow. As they gathered their things and stepped into the humid night, her mind raced. Chief Owusu wasn't just a patient. He was a storm, ripping through St. Mary's, leaving wreckage in his wake. Nkechi's bruise, Efua's tears, they were warnings. Adwoa's hands clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She'd faced hunger, eviction, Nkechi's taunts, but this felt different, bigger. A man like that could break her, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to fight back. The trotro rattled them back to Teshi, the city lights blurring past. Efua leaned on her shoulder, exhausted, while Adwoa stared out the window, her reflection a ghost in the glass. She thought of Mama, Kwame, the family counting on her. She couldn't falter, not now. But as the engine roared and the night pressed in, a cold dread settled in her bones. Chief Owusu was here, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross. And when they did, nothing would be the same. The days after Chief Owusu's arrival blurred into a tense rhythm at St. Mary's Hospital. The VIP wing became a no-man's land, a place nurses avoided unless summoned, their whispers trailing through the corridors like ghosts. Adwoa kept her head down, her hands busy with the general ward, checking fevers, changing bandages, offering smiles to patients who clung to her kindness like a lifeline. But the shadow of Chief Owusu loomed large, his name a thunderclap in every hushed conversation. She'd seen the wreckage he left, Nkechi's bruised pride, Efua's broken spirit, and it haunted her. She prayed each morning, her lips moving silently over a cracked rosary. Lord, keep me far from that man. It was a humid afternoon, the air thick with the promise of rain, when Adwoa's routine shifted. She was finishing her rounds, her sandals scuffing the tiled floor, when Sister Amma, a senior nurse with a stern face and gentle hands, called her over. Adwoa, take these files to the head nurse's office on the 4th floor. Quick. Yes, sister, Adwoa replied, taking the stack of papers. Her stomach fluttered. Miss ESI, the head nurse, was Nkechi's aunt, and every trip to her office felt like stepping into a lion's den. But she nodded, her obedience a shield, and headed for the elevator. The ride up was quiet, the hum of the machine a brief respite from the ward's chaos. When the doors slid open, the 4th floor stretched before her. A world apart, polished floors, soft lighting, the faint scent of lavender instead of antiseptic. She delivered the files to Miss ESI, who barely looked up from her desk, her pen scratching across a ledger. Good. Leave them there, she muttered, her voice clipped. Adwoa murmured a thank you and slipped out, her shoulders relaxing as the door clicked shut. She started back toward the elevator, her steps light, when something caught her eye, a door ajar, just a crack, spilling a sliver of sunlight into the dim hall. She slowed, her curiosity tugging at her. It was the VIP wing, a place she'd never dared enter. Through the gap, she saw a figure, an old man, frail and hunched, struggling to swing his legs over the edge of a bed. His hospital gown hung loose on his thin frame, and his hands gripped the sheets, trembling with effort. He was alone, no nurse in sight, his breath rasping in the silence. Adwoa's heart lurched. She didn't think, she acted. Pushing the door open, she rushed in, her voice soft but urgent. Sir, please let me help you. You'll fall. The man's head snapped up, his eyes sharp and dark, cutting through her like a blade. She froze mid-step, her breath catching. His face was weathered, lined with years and something deeper, anger, pain. She couldn't tell. His gray hair was cropped close, and a gold ring glinted on his finger, a mark of wealth even in sickness. I don't need your pity, he growled, his voice low and rough, thick with a Nigerian accent. I just want the bathroom. Adwoa swallowed, her pulse racing. She knew that voice, that presence, Chief Owusu Dankwa, the man who'd thrown cups, cursed nurses, broken Efua's spirit. Fear coiled in her gut, urging her to run, but her feet stayed rooted. He was a patient, not a monster, she told herself. and he was struggling. "I'm a nurse, sir," she said, stepping closer, her hands outstretched. "Let me help you. It's my job." He glared at her, his jaw tight, but then his strength faltered, his arms shaking as he tried to stand. He grunted, a sound of frustration, and didn't push her away when she slid an arm under his. She guided him slowly, her touch firm but gentle, his weight heavy against her. His skin was cool, clammy, and she felt the tremor in his bones. A man crumbling, despite his pride. They shuffled to the small bathroom, the silence between them thick, broken only by his labored breathing. She waited outside, her back to the wall, her mind spinning. This was Chief Owusu, the terror of St. Mary's, and yet, in that moment, he was just an old man, vulnerable and alone. She thought of Efua's tears, Nkechi's bruise, and her stomach twisted. How could she help him when he'd hurt the people she loved? But then she saw Mama's face in her mind, frail and coughing, and her resolve hardened. She'd cared for worse, drunkards, thieves, men who spat at her. She could do this. He emerged minutes later, his steps unsteady, and she took his arm again, guiding him back to the bed. She tucked the sheets around him, her hands quick and sure, and dared to ask, "Is there anything else you need, sir?" He stared at her, his eyes narrowing, then flicked a hand toward the window. "Open the blinds. I want to see outside." Adwoa nodded, crossing the room to lift the slats. Sunlight poured in, illuminating the plush chairs, the polished table, the stark contrast to the crowded wards below. Outside, the hospital garden bloomed, hibiscus swaying, children chasing a ball. Chief Owusu watched, his gaze distant, and muttered, "They're free out there, walking, laughing. I can't even stand without help. Useless." The word hung heavy, laced with bitterness. Adwoa turned, her chest tightening. She saw it then, not just anger, but a deep, aching sadness in his eyes, a man trapped in a body betraying him. "Sir," she said softly, stepping closer, "your worth isn't in your legs. We all have seasons, strong ones, weak ones. It doesn't mean you're less." He snorted, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "So I'm just old, eh?" She smiled, a spark of warmth breaking through her fear. "I didn't say that, sir, you did." For a moment he said nothing, his gaze drifting back to the window. Then he rasped, "What's your name, girl?" "Adwoa, Sir Adwoa Mensa," she replied, her voice steady now. He nodded, a small, grudging gesture, and waved her off. "Go. I've got no more use for you today." She left, her heart pounding as the door clicked shut behind her. The hall felt colder, the weight of that encounter pressing on her. She'd met the storm and survived, barely. But as she rode the elevator down, his eyes lingered in her mind. Sharp, yes, but broken too. She didn't know why he'd let her help, why he hadn't lashed out. All she knew was that something had shifted, a thread tied between them, fragile and unspoken. And deep down, she feared it would pull her back. The elevator doors clanged shut behind Adwoa, sealing her brief escape from the VIP wing. Her hands trembled as she clutched her bag, the memory of Chief Owusu's sharp eyes and rasping voice clinging to her like damp heat. She stepped back into the bustle of the general ward, the familiar chaos of ringing bells and hurried voices grounding her. But her mind wouldn't settle. She'd touched the edge of a storm, helped him, spoken to him, and survived. Yet a quiet dread coiled in her chest, whispering that it wasn't over. She shook it off, forcing herself to focus on her patients. There needs a tether to keep her steady. The next morning dawned gray, the sky over Accra heavy with clouds that mirrored Adwoa's mood. She and Efua walked to St. Mary's in silence, the usual chatter replaced by the crunch of gravel under their sandals. Efua's face still carried the shadow of Chief Owusu's words. Her usual spark dimmed. Adwoa wanted to comfort her, to promise it would pass, but her own fears choked the words. They clocked in, the nurse's station a hive of activity. When Sister Amma approached, her expression unreadable. "Adwoa, Miss ESI wants you in her office." "Now," she said, her tone clipped. Adwoa's stomach dropped. She glanced at Efua, whose eyes widened with alarm. "ESI? Nkechi's aunt." Efua whispered, grabbing her arm. "Adwoa, this happened to me before. He called for me, and then I was stuck with him. What if it's Chief Owusu?" "Don't say that," Adwoa hissed, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay calm. It could be anything, maybe a shift change. We're short-staffed here. But her heart thudded, a drumbeat of panic. She took a deep breath, smoothing her uniform, and headed for the elevator, each step heavier than the last. She prayed silently, God, please, not him. I'm not strong enough. Miss Iasai's office was a fortress of order, files stacked neatly, a fan whirring on the desk, her glasses perched low as she scanned a chart. She looked up as Adwoa entered, her gaze piercing. Close the door, she said, her voice flat. Adwoa obeyed, her fingers slick with sweat, and stood before the desk, feeling like a child awaiting punishment. Adwoa Mensa, Miss Iasai began, setting the chart down. Starting today, you're reassigned. You'll be Chief Owusu Dankwa's nurse in the VIP wing. No discussion. The words hit like a slap, stealing Adwoa's breath. Her knees wobbled, and she gripped the edge of a chair to steady herself. Ma'am, she stammered. Please, can it be someone else? I've heard what he's done, Efua, Nkechi, the others. I'm scared, ma'am. I don't think I can handle him. Miss Iasai's eyes narrowed, her lips a thin line. He asked for you, Adwoa, specifically. Said your name clear as day. Adwoa Mensa. I don't know why and I don't care. He's a patient, a VIP, and you're a nurse. That's your job. She slid a thick file across the desk. Take his chart. Go. Adwoa stared at the file, her mind reeling. He asked for me? The memory of yesterday flashed. His trembling hands, his grudging nod, the flicker of something human in his eyes. She'd helped him, yes, but why her? Her throat tightened, fear clawing at her. Ma'am, no excuses, Miss Iasai snapped, cutting her off. You're not the first to face him, and you won't be the last. Get to it. She turned back to her ledger, dismissing her. Adwoa took the file, her hands shaking as she flipped it open. Chief Owusu Dankwa, 74, stage 4 liver cancer. Severe pain, fatigue, jaundice, no more chemo, palliative care only. The words blurred, her eyes stinging. He was dying, a man crumbling under wealth and rage, and now she was tied to him. She left the office, the door clicking shut like a prison gate, and stood in the hall, the file heavy in her arms. She wanted to run, to Teshi, to Kumasi, anywhere, but there was no escape. Mama needed her, Kwame needed her, Efua's family needed her. She couldn't fail. The VIP wing felt different as she approached, the silence oppressive, broken only by the hum of machines. She paused outside Chief Owusu's room, her heart hammering. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and she wiped it with her sleeve, whispering, God, give me strength. Then she pushed the door open. He lay there, propped against pillows, and force snaking into his arm. His skin was sallow, his eyes sunken, but they snapped to her with that same sharpness. You, he rasped, recognition flickering. The girl from yesterday. Adwoa swallowed, forcing a smile. Yes, sir, I'm Nurse Adwoa Mensa. I'll be looking after you from now on. Her voice wavered, but she held his gaze, refusing to flinch. He grunted, a sound between annoyance and approval. Took you long enough. What's that in your hand? Your chart, sir, she said, stepping closer. She set it down and began her routine, checking his pulse, adjusting the 4, wiping his brow with a cool cloth. His skin was feverish, his breath shallow, and she felt the fragility beneath his gruff exterior. Her fear lingered, but pity crept in too. A dying man, alone in a gilded cage. How are you feeling today, sir? She asked, tucking the sheets around him. Like death's knocking, he muttered, his voice hoarse but softer than she'd expected. Heavy, tired. I'm here to make you comfortable, she said, meeting his eyes. Anything you need, just tell me. He studied her, his gaze probing, then nodded faintly. Good. Don't mess it up. She nodded back, her hands steady now. The day unfolded quietly. He didn't shout, didn't throw anything, just watched her with that piercing stare. She moved with care, explaining each pill, each step, her voice a calm thread in the room's stillness. When she finished, she gathered her things and said, I'll be outside, sir, call if you need me. He waved her off, but as she reached the door, he spoke again. Adwoa Mensa, don't disappoint me. She paused, her hand on the knob, and glanced back. I won't, sir. Then she stepped out, her chest tight with a mix of relief and wonder. She'd faced the storm again, and it hadn't swallowed her. Yet, the days that followed wove Adwoa into Chief Owusu's world like a thread through a loom. Each morning, she stepped into the VIP wing with a quiet resolve, her heart still fluttering with unease but steadied by duty. The hospital buzzed around her, nurses whispering about the old man's latest outburst, doctors tiptoeing past his door, but inside his room, time slowed. It was just her, him, and the hum of the 4-pump, a fragile piece she guarded with every careful step. Adwoa learned his rhythms quickly. He was gruff, his words sharp as a machete when the pain flared, snapping at her to hurry, to fix the pillows, to stop hovering. But she didn't flinch. She'd seen worse in Kumasi, patients cursing through fever, mothers weeping over stillborns, and she knew his anger wasn't her. It was the cancer eating him alive, the helplessness he couldn't voice. So she moved with grace, her hands gentle as she adjusted his drip, her voice soft as she named each pill. "This one's for the pain, sir, this one keeps the fever down," she'd say, holding the glass steady as he swallowed. He never thanked her, not outright. His nods were curt, his silences heavy, but she noticed the shift, a flicker in his eyes when she entered, a pause before he barked. She took it as a sign, small as a seed, that her care was reaching him, and she poured more into it. One morning, as she walked to St. Mary's, the sun barely peeking over Accra's rooftops, she passed a market stall bursting with color, yams, peppers, and a cluster of wild artichoke flowers, their purple heads swaying in the breeze. She stopped, her fingers brushing the petals. They were simple, not grand like roses, but they reminded her of home, of Mama's garden before the drought took it. She thought of Chief Owusu, alone in that sterile room, no visitors, no gifts. On impulse, she spent her last 5 sadies, cradling the flowers as she hurried on. When she stepped into his room, he was awake, staring at the ceiling, his face etched with exhaustion. "Good morning, sir," she said brightly, setting her bag down. She held up the flowers, their stems wrapped in a damp cloth. "I brought you these artichokes from the market. Thought they'd cheer the place up." He turned his head slowly, his brows knitting as he stared at the bouquet. For a moment, she feared he'd scoff, toss them aside like he'd done with Nkechi's water. But he didn't. His eyes softened, a sheen of moisture gathering, and he looked away, his voice gruff. "Put them there," he muttered, pointing to the table. She did, arranging them in a plastic cup, their purple heads a quiet rebellion against the room's stark white. She didn't press him, didn't ask why his hands clenched the sheets or why he blinked so hard. She sensed it, a crack in his armor, a wound she couldn't see, and gave him space, turning to her tasks with the same steady care. She wiped his brow, checked his pulse, her fingers lingering a moment longer than needed, a silent promise she was there. He watched her, quieter than usual, and she felt the weight of his gaze, heavy with something unspoken. The next day, the air in his room hung thick, a storm brewing beneath his silence. She entered with his tray, pills, water, a spoon for the porridge the kitchen sent up, and found him slumped against the pillows, his eyes dark with despair. Before she could speak, he swatted the tray from her hands. It crashed to the floor, pills scattering like pebbles, water splashing across the bed. "I don't want it," he roared, his voice raw, cracking the stillness. "What's the point? I'm dying, months, weeks, who knows? These pills just drag it out." Adwoa flinched, the clang echoing in her ears, but she didn't retreat. She saw it then, not rage but fear, a man drowning in his own end. Her heart ached, a pang sharp as a needle. She took a breath, steadying herself, and knelt beside the bed, her eyes level with his. "Sir," she said, her voice low, trembling with care, "I know it's hard. I can't imagine the pain, the weight you're carrying. But you're still here, waking up each day. That means something. God's not done with you yet." He glared at her, his chest heaving, but she didn't look away. She saw the boy in Kumasi, fighting malaria, Mama coughing through the night, life clinging on, fragile but fierce. "I can't take the cancer away," she continued, her words soft as a lullaby. "But I can be here. You're not alone, sir, not as long as I'm with you." Silence stretched, thick and heavy, his breath slowing as her words sank in. His head dropped, his shoulders sagging, and she saw it, a flicker of shame, a man unmasked. She waited, giving him time, then rose quietly. "I'll get fresh pills," she said, gathering the mess with steady hands. When she returned, he took the new tray without a word, swallowing the medicine as she held the glass. His eyes stayed on her, softer now. A storm calmed. That afternoon, as she adjusted his pillows, he spoke, his voice a whisper against the hum of the fan. "That view," he said, nodding to the window. "It's beautiful today, eh?" She glanced out, clouds parting, sunlight spilling over the garden, children laughing below. "Yes, sir," she agreed, her smile warm. "It's a good day to see it." He nodded, a faint curve to his lips, and she felt it, a bridge forming, built on her quiet care, her refusal to turn away. She didn't know his story, not yet, but she knew pain when she saw it, and she'd stay, tending it with every gentle touch, every kind word, until he let her in. The bond between Adwoa and Chief Owusu grew like a quiet river, carving its path through stone with patience and care. Each day, she entered his room with a steady heart, her fear of his temper fading into a tender resolve. The VIP wing, once a place of dread, became her sanctuary, a space where she could pour her gentleness into a man who'd built walls of rage around his pain. He still snapped at times, his voice a whip when the pain clawed too deep, but Adwoa saw beyond it. She saw the flinch in his eyes, the tremble in his hands, and she stayed, her presence a soft light in his darkening world. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Accra, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Adwoa found him different. He sat propped against his pillows, the artichoke flowers still bright on the table, but his gaze was lost, fixed on the window with a heaviness she hadn't seen before. The room was still, the hum of the four a faint pulse, and she moved quietly, setting his dinner tray, jollof rice and a cup of water, beside him. She adjusted his blanket, her fingers brushing his arm, and spoke softly. "The sunset's beautiful tonight, sir, like a painting." He turned his head, slow and deliberate, and for the first time, she saw a crack, a tear glistening in the corner of his eye, caught in the fading light. "I never noticed sunsets," he said, his voice a rasp, barely above a whisper. "Not before this, not even when I was well." Adwoa paused, her hands still on the blanket, her breath catching at the weight in his words. "Why not, sir?" she asked, her tone gentle, inviting rather than prying. He sighed, a sound that seemed to pull from the depths of his soul, and leaned back, his eyes drifting to the ceiling. "Too busy," he muttered. "Business, money, deals, those were my gods. Hotels in Lagos, plantations in Calabar, offices in Accra. I chased them all, built a kingdom. Thought that was life." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But now, it's dust. All of it." Adwoa sat on the edge of a chair, her hands folded in her lap, listening as the words spilled out, raw and unguarded. She felt the shift. He wasn't just talking. He was unburdening, peeling back layers she hadn't dared touch. "Did it make you happy, sir?" she asked, her voice a whisper, careful not to break the fragile thread. He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that turned into a cough. "Happy? Maybe once. When the money rolled in, when the big men shook my hand. But real happiness." He shook his head, his eyes glinting with something sharp. "Regret," she realized. "No, girl. Not the kind that stays." She waited, sensing more, her heart aching for the man behind the mask. Then he spoke again, his voice trembling, cracking like dry earth. "I had a daughter once, my only child, Amara. She was 6 when I lost her." Adwoa's breath hitched, her chest tightening. She hadn't expected this, a daughter. A loss buried so deep it carved lines into his face. "What happened, sir?" she asked, her words soft as a prayer. His hands clenched the sheets, knuckles whitening, and his eyes shut tight, as if seeing it all again. "She had a weak heart, born with it. Doctors said she'd grow out of it, but she didn't. I wasn't there when she needed me most. I was in a meeting signing some damn contract, while she fought for breath in a hospital bed. My wife called, begged me to come, but I said, later. Later never came." His voice broke, a sob choking through, and tears slipped down his cheeks, unchecked. "She died alone, Adwoa. My little Amara. I didn't even hold her hand." Adwoa's eyes burned, her own tears spilling as she listened. She saw it, his empire of wealth, his roaring temper, all a shield against this unbearable pain. She thought of her father, gone too soon from a stroke, leaving Mama to raise 4 children alone. She knew loss, the hole it left, but this was a wound festering with guilt. She reached out, her hand resting on his, her touch light but firm. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No father should lose a child like that." He didn't pull away, his trembling fingers curling slightly under hers. "My wife left me after," he said, his voice barely audible. "Blamed me, said I chose money over our girl. She was right. I buried myself in work, piled up riches to forget. But it didn't work. Now I'm here old, sick, alone. All that wealth, and no one's by my side." Adwoa's heart shattered, pieces lodging in her throat. She saw Mama's sacrifices, Kwame's mistakes, her own endless struggle, and yet, she'd never felt this kind of loneliness, this hollowed-out despair. She squeezed his hand, her voice steady despite her tears. "You're not alone now, sir, I'm here. The nurses, the doctors, we're here. We may not be blood, but we care. I care." He opened his eyes, meeting hers, and for the first time, she saw no wall, just a man, broken and searching. "You mean that girl?" he asked, his voice raw, vulnerable. "Yes, sir," she said, her smile small but true. "As long as I'm your nurse, you won't face this alone." A long silence followed, his breath evening out, his tears drying on his weathered face. Then he nodded, a faint, weary gesture, and murmured, "Thank you, Adwoa. No one said that to me in years." She stayed a moment longer, her hands still on his, feeling the warmth of that connection. A bridge built from her kindness, his grief. When she rose to leave, he called after her. "Keep those flowers alive, eh? They're the only color I've got." "I will, sir," she promised, glancing at the artichokes. Their purple heads a quiet testament to their bond. She stepped out, her chest full, grief for his loss, hope for his opening heart. She'd seen his soul laid bare, and she'd hold it gently, as long as he let her. The dawn broke gently over Accra, a soft glow seeping through the curtains of Chief Owusu's room as Adwoa stepped inside. The air carried the faint hum of morning traffic, mingling with the steady drip of his 4. She'd grown used to this space, the plush chairs, the artichoke flowers now wilting but still proud on the table, the old man's presence filling every corner. Since his confession about Amara, a quiet trust had bloomed between them, fragile but real. He greeted her with a nod now, his gruffness softened, and she returned it with a smile, her hands already moving to his chart. "Good morning, sir," she said, her voice warm as she checked his pulse. "Sleep well. Better than most nights," he rasped, his eyes following her with a clarity she hadn't seen before. "You're early today." "Market was quiet," she replied, adjusting his drip with care. "Thought I'd beat the rush." She moved with her usual grace, wiping his brow, fluffing his pillows, her touch a rhythm of comfort. But as she turned to fetch his pills, his voice stopped her cold. "Adwoa, sit a moment," he said, low and firm, a tone she couldn't ignore. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. There was something different in his eyes, intense, unguarded, a spark she couldn't place. She pulled the chair closer, settling beside him, her hands clasped tight in her lap. "Yes, sir?" she asked, her voice steady despite the sudden flutter in her chest. He took a breath, slow and shaky, his gaze dropping to his hands, frail, veined, trembling slightly against the sheets. "I've been thinking," he began, his words deliberate as if testing their weight. "About Amara, about what I missed. I'm old, Adwoa, older than I feel sometimes, but I know my time's short. The doctors won't say it, but I feel it in my bones." Adwoa's throat tightened, a pang of dread slicing through her. She'd read his chart, liver cancer, spreading fast, no cure, but hearing him say it so raw hit differently. "Sir, don't talk like that," she whispered, leaning forward. "You're still here. Miracles happen." He shook his head, a faint, sad smile tugging at his lips. "No miracles for me, girl. I've made peace with it, mostly. But there's one thing I want, one last thing before I go." He looked up, his eyes locking with hers, and the air shifted, heavy with anticipation. "I want you to pretend to be my daughter, just for a day." The words landed like a thunderclap, stunning her into silence. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. She stared at him, her mind racing, searching his face for a joke, a trick, anything but this. Pretend to be his daughter? Amara, the little girl he'd lost, the ghost he carried? Her pulse hammered, a mix of shock and disbelief flooding her. "Sir," she stammered. "What? What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a plea, raw and urgent. "One day, Adwoa, take me out, away from this cage. Let me feel what it's like to be a father again, to have a daughter by my side. I'd choose you if I could, you're kind, strong, like she might have been. Please." Adwoa's hands gripped the chair, her knuckles whitening as the weight of his request sank in. She saw the longing in his eyes, the desperation of a man staring down his end, grasping for a piece of what he'd lost. It was insane, impossible, even. A nurse and a patient playing family? Yet her heart twisted, caught between the absurdity and the ache of his words. She thought of her own father, his laughter, his calloused hands lifting her as a child, and the hole he'd left when he died. Could she give this man that fleeting joy? "Sir, she faltered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can. I'm not her." "I know you're not Amara," he said quickly, his hand reaching for hers, his grip weak but insistent. "I'm not asking you to be. Just let me have a day. I'll pay you, Adwoa, a lot. For your family, for you. Whatever you need." The offer jolted her, a spark of practicality cutting through her shock. Money enough to fix Kwame's mess, to buy Mama's medicine, to breathe again. But it stung too, a cold edge to his warmth. She pulled her hand back, her eyes flashing with quiet resolve. "No, sir," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor. "If I do this, it's not for money. A daughter's love isn't bought, not even a pretend one. If it makes you happy, I'll do it. But not for Sadie's." He froze, his breath catching, and for a moment, she feared she'd offended him. But then his face softened, a tear slipping free, tracing a path down his weathered cheek. "You're a rare one, Adwoa Mensa," he murmured, his voice thick with gratitude. "I don't deserve that kind of heart." She swallowed hard, her own eyes stinging. "You deserve peace. Sir, if this gives you that, I'll try." She forced a smile, small but genuine, masking the storm inside, shock, fear, a strange tenderness she couldn't name. He nodded, his hand trembling as it fell back to the sheets. "Tomorrow, then," he said, a flicker of hope lighting his face. "Get me out of here. One day." Adwoa rose, her legs unsteady, and gathered her things in a daze. "I'll talk to the doctor," she promised, her voice distant to her own ears. She stepped out, the door clicking shut, and leaned against the wall, her breath ragged. Pretend to be his daughter? The idea spun in her mind, wild and unreal, a request she'd never imagined. She saw his tears, felt his grip, and her heart ached with the weight of it. She didn't know how to play Amara, how to heal a wound so deep, but she'd try. For him, for the father she'd lost, for the unexpected bond tying them together. The morning sun spilled over Accra, warm and golden. As Adwoa stood outside St. Mary's Hospital, her heart a drumbeat of nerves and hope. She'd convinced Dr. Osei, a soft-spoken senior physician, to let Chief Owusu out for a day, pleading with promises of care and a driver, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. Now, a sleek black SUV waited at the curb, its driver, a wiry man named Kwesi, nodding as she helped the old man from his wheelchair. Chief Owusu wore a simple kaftan, its blue cotton crisp against his frail frame, and his eyes sparkled with a rare lightness as he settled into the back seat beside her. "You're sure about this, girl?" he asked, his voice gruff but teasing, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Adwoa grinned, buckling his seatbelt with care. "Yes, sir, Dad. One day, just like you wanted." The word Dad felt strange on her tongue, a borrowed title, but it lit his face like a flame, and she felt the weight of it settle between them. The SUV rolled through the city, tires humming on the potholed roads, past hawkers waving Kent cloth and children chasing tires with sticks. Adwoa sat close, her shoulder brushing his, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He smelled of antiseptic and faint cologne, a mix of hospital and pride, and she felt his warmth, fragile but alive. Their first stop was Makola Market, its stalls a riot of color and sound, women shouting prices, the sizzle of frying yam, the tang of smoked fish in the air. Chief Owusu leaned forward, his eyes tracing the chaos. Amara loved markets, he said, his voice soft, almost lost in the din. She'd tug my hand, begging for groundnuts or a stick of sugarcane. I'd carry her on my shoulders so she could see it all. Adwoa squeezed his arm, picturing a little girl with bright eyes, her laughter echoing through the stalls. "Let's get some groundnuts then, Dad," she said, her voice playful. She hopped out, Kwesi steadying the old man as he followed, his cane tapping the ground. She haggled with a vendor, her laughter ringing as she handed him a small bag, the nuts warm in her palm. "For you," she said, pressing it into his hand. He took it, his fingers brushing hers, and popped one into his mouth, chewing slowly. "Just like I remember," he murmured, his gaze distant but content. They sat on a bench under a mango tree, the market swirling around them, and she fed him another, her fingers steady as he smiled, a real smile, not the bitter twist she'd known. She felt his joy, a quiet echo of her own father lifting her at Kumasi's Kajisha market, and her chest swelled with a bittersweet ache. Next, they drove to a small roadside joint near Labadi Beach, its wooden tables weathered by salt air. The smell of jollof rice and grilled tilapia wafted over them as Adwoa ordered, her voice firm but warm. "2 plates, Auntie, and make it quick." "Eh?" She helped him from the car, her arm looped through his, guiding him to a seat. The ocean stretched before them, waves crashing in to steady him, and she saw his shoulders relax, the tension of the hospital melting away. "Amara loved fish," he said, staring at the horizon. "We'd sit by the water in Lagos, just us, eating with our hands. She'd get it all over her face, and I'd laugh till my sides hurt." Adwoa smiled, scooping a spoonful of jollof and holding it out. "Then eat, Dad. Let's make it messy." He chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound she hadn't heard before, and took the bite, rice clinging to his chin. She laughed too, wiping it with a napkin, her touch tender as a daughter's. They ate side by side, the sun warming their faces, the breeze tugging at her headscarf. She felt his presence beside her, solid despite his frailty, and for a moment, she wasn't just pretending. She was his, and he was hers. Their final stop was a Kent shop in OSU, its walls draped with vibrant weaves, reds, golds, greens dancing in the light. Adwoa guided him inside, her hand steady on his elbow, the air thick with the scent of dye and thread. "She loved bright things," he said, running a trembling hand over a bolt of cloth. "I'd buy her dresses yellow like the sun. She'd twirl in them, laughing. Then we'll get something bright," Adwoa declared, picking a yellow shawl, its edges shimmering with gold. She draped it over his shoulders, her fingers lingering as she adjusted it. "For you, Dad, to remember her." He looked at her, his eyes glistening, and nodded, clutching the fabric like a lifeline. He insisted on more shoes, a dress for her, his voice firm despite his waning strength. "Let me spoil you, like I should have done for her," she protested, but his glare silenced her, and she chose a simple blue dress, her heart full as he paid, his hands shaking but proud. They sat in the shop's shade, the purchases piled beside them, and he reached for her hand, his grip weak but warm. "Thank you, my child," he whispered, his voice breaking. This is what I missed." Adwoa's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. She saw her father in him, his stern love, his quiet gifts, and squeezed his hand back. "I'm glad, Dad," she said, her voice thick. "I'll never forget today." As the SUV carried them back to St. Mary's, the sun sinking low, she leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. His breathing was shallow, his body heavy, but he smiled, a peace settling over him. She felt it too, a day of memories, borrowed but beautiful, stitching them together in a way she'd never expected. The hospital loomed ahead, but for now, they were father and daughter, lost in a world they'd built from love and loss. The trotro rattled back to Teshi that evening, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red as Adwoa leaned against the window, her heart still humming from the day. Chief Owusu's voice, calling her my child, echoed in her ears, his frail hand warm in hers, the yellow shawl draped over his shoulders like a promise. She smiled to herself, a quiet glow spreading through her chest. It had been perfect, a borrowed day of father and daughter, a gift she'd given him, and one he'd given back. She couldn't wait to tell Efua, to relive every laugh, every bite of jollof rice under the Labadi sun. The next morning broke with a gentle drizzle, the air cool as Adwoa and Efua walked arm in arm to St. Mary's. Her steps were light, her uniform crisp, and she chattered with a brightness that made Efua grin. You should have seen him, Efua, smiling like a boy when we ate by the beach. He bought me a dress, insisted on it. I called him Dad, and he looked so happy. Efua squeezed her arm, her eyes sparkling. Adwoa, you're glowing. I've never seen you like this. Chief Owusu, a happy man? You're a miracle worker. Adwoa laughed, the sound soft against the patter of rain on their umbrellas. Maybe he's not so bad, eh? Just needed someone to. Her words cut off as they stepped into the hospital, the air shifting, heavy with a stillness that pricked her skin. Nurses moved slower, their faces tight, and a murmur rippled through the lobby. Adwoa's smile faltered, a cold unease creeping up her spine. Miss Esi emerged from the ward, her stern face softened by something rare, sorrow. She spotted Adwoa and approached, her steps deliberate, her voice low. Adwoa, I need to speak with you. Adwoa's heart stuttered, her grip tightening on Efua's arm. Yes, ma'am? She asked, her voice small, dread pooling in her gut. Miss Esi took a breath, her eyes meeting Adwoa's with a gentleness that terrified her. It's Chief Owusu. He's gone. Last night, in his sleep, a heart attack. It was peaceful, they say. The words slammed into Adwoa like a wave, knocking the air from her lungs. She blinked, her mind blank, the world tilting beneath her feet. Gone? She whispered, the syllable jagged, unreal. No. No, that can't be. I saw him yesterday. He was fine, he was happy. Miss Esi's hand touched her shoulder, firm but kind. I'm sorry, Adwoa. It happens sometimes, sudden, quiet. He didn't suffer. Adwoa shook her head, tears welling fast, blurring Miss Esi's face. No, you don't understand. We laughed, we ate, he called me his child. He can't be gone. Her voice cracked, rising into a sob, and she stumbled back, Efua catching her as her legs buckled. The hospital spun, white walls, beeping machines, nurses staring, and she broke free, running toward the VIP wing, her sandals slapping the tiles. Adwoa, wait! Efua called, her voice echoing, but Adwoa didn't stop. She had to see him, had to prove it was a mistake. She burst into his room, the door banging against the wall, and froze. The bed was empty, sheets smooth, the artichoke flowers drooping in their cup. His caftan was gone. The four stand silent, the air sterile and cold. She sank onto the mattress, clutching a pillow, its faint scent of his cologne piercing her like a knife. No, 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 she sobbed, her voice raw, tearing from her throat. She pressed the pillow to her chest, rocking back and forth, tears streaming down her face. He'd been her father for a day, her dad, with his gruff laugh, his trembling hands, and now he was gone, snatched away as quickly as her own father had been. She saw his smile at the beach, felt the weight of the shawl he'd bought, heard his whispered thanks, and the loss clawed at her, a gaping wound she couldn't staunch. Efua slipped in, her steps soft, and knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around Adwoa's shaking frame. Oh, Adwoa, she murmured, her voice thick with tears. I'm so sorry. He's gone, Efua? Adwoa choked, burying her face in her friend's shoulder. I thought we'd have more time. He was happy. I made him happy, and now he's just gone. Her sobs deepened, wrenching from her core, a grief so sharp it stole her breath. She'd lost her father to a stroke years ago, a sudden rip in her world, and now this, another father, another tear. She clung to Efua, her nails digging into her friend's uniform, as if holding on could bring him back. Efua rocked her gently, her own tears falling. You gave him something beautiful, Adwoa. That day it was everything to him. He went peaceful because of you. Adwoa shook her head, her voice a broken whisper. It's not enough. I wanted more days, more laughs. He was alone so long, and I thought I could fix it. She saw his eyes, soft with gratitude, and the emptiness of the room mocked her, a cruel reminder of how fleeting it had been. Her chest ached, a hollow scream trapped inside, and she pressed her face into the pillow, muffling her cries. She'd given him one day, but it wasn't enough, not for him, not for her. The hospital moved on around them, footsteps, voices, the hum of life, But Adwoa stayed, lost in her grief, the weight of another father's loss crushing her fragile heart. The days after Chief Owusu's death draped Adwoa in a fog of grief, heavy and unrelenting. She returned to St. Mary's the next morning, her eyes red-rimmed, her steps mechanical, driven by duty rather than will. The hospital buzzed around her, nurses darting between wards, the intercom crackling, but she moved through it like a ghost, her heart tethered to that empty room in the VIP wing. Efua stayed close, her arm brushing Adwoa's as they clocked in, her voice a soft anchor. "You don't have to be here, you know," she murmured. "Take a day, Adwoa." Adwoa shook her head, her voice hoarse. "I can't sit still, Efua. If I stop, I'll fall apart." She needed the work, the routine, the patience, to keep the ache at bay, to dull the memory of his smile fading into silence. But the weight clung to her, a shadow she couldn't shake. By midday, the whispers began, soft at first, like the rustle of leaves, then sharper, cutting through the ward. Nurses glanced at her, their eyes darting away when she looked back, their hushed tones prickling her skin. She caught fragments, Adwoa and Chief Owusu, too close, strange, and her stomach twisted, a cold dread creeping in. She tried to ignore it, focusing on a patient's drip, her hands trembling as she adjusted the line. But the air grew thick, charged with something ugly. Efua noticed too, her brow furrowing as she pulled Adwoa aside during a break in the cafeteria. "Something's off," she said, her voice low, urgent. "They're talking about you, about him. I heard it in the locker room. What's going on?" Adwoa's throat tightened, her fingers clutching her tumbler of water. "I don't know," she whispered, her mind racing. "Maybe they're just surprised he liked me?" But the words felt hollow, a weak shield against the unease gnawing at her. The truth crashed in moments later, swift and brutal. Nkechi strutted into the cafeteria, her red nails flashing, her smirk a blade aimed straight at Adwoa. She slid into a chair across from them, her voice loud, dripping with venom. Well, Adwoa, you're the talk of the hospital now. Didn't take you long to climb the ladder. From homeless to Chief Owusu's special girl. Quite the story." Adwoa froze, her tumbler clattering to the table, water splashing over her hands. "What are you saying, Nkechi?" she asked, her voice low, trembling with a mix of fear and fury. Nkechi leaned forward, her eyes glinting with malice. "Don't play dumb. Everyone's saying it, you cozied up to that old man, got under his skin or maybe under his sheets. How else did you tame him when no one else could? Bet he left you something nice for your services." The words hit like a slap, sharp and searing, igniting a fire in Adwoa's chest. She stood, her chair scraping the floor, her hands clenched into fists. "That's a lie," she snapped, her voice rising, cracking with pain. "I cared for him, he was dying, Nkechi. How dare you twist that?" Nkechi laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that drew every eye in the room. "Oh, please, spare me the tears. You think we're fools? One day he's throwing cups, the next he's smiling at you? Suspicious, Maybe you gave him more than medicine to soften him up." Efua shot to her feet, slamming her hands on the table, her face a storm of rage. "You're disgusting, Nkechi. Adwoa's worth 10 of you." She nursed him with heart, something you'll never understand. "You dare spread this filth? I'll..." "Efua, stop." Adwoa cut in, grabbing her arm, her voice shaking but firm. She turned to Nkechi, her eyes blazing through tears. "You've hated me from the start. But this, dragging his name, his memory, through your lies? He's gone, Nkechi. What did I ever do to you?" Nkechi smirked, unfazed, her voice a taunt. "You existed, Adwoa. That's enough. And now I've got them all talking. Good luck washing this off. You'll quit soon." Too ashamed to stay, she stood, tossing her hair, and sauntered out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Adwoa sank back into her chair, her breath ragged, tears spilling hot down her cheeks. The cafeteria hummed with stares, whispers swelling like a tide, and she felt them, judging, accusing, stripping away the day she'd cherished with Chief Owusu. Her grief twisted into something darker, rage, betrayal, a wound reopened. "She's ruining it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "That day, it was pure Efua. He was my dad for a moment, and she's making it dirty." Efua knelt beside her, her hands gripping Adwoa's shoulders, her voice fierce. "She's a liar, Adwoa. We know the truth, you and me. He loved you like a daughter, not that. Don't let her win." Before Adwoa could reply, the door swung open, and Missy Si stormed in, her face a mask of fury. The room fell silent, the air crackling as she marched to their table, her eyes locked on Adwoa. "Is it true?" she barked, her voice cutting through the tension. "Nkechi's spreading this poison about you and Chief Owusu?" Adwoa's heart pounded, her mouth dry. "Ma'am, it's not true," she said, her voice small but steady. "I cared for him, nothing more. She's lying to hurt me." Efua jumped in, her words sharp. "I heard her, Missy Si. She bragged about it in the ward, said she'd ruin Adwoa. I've got proof, recorded her on my phone. She's jealous, spiteful." Missy Si's gaze shifted to Efua, then back to Adwoa, her expression softening into something rare, disappointment, not in them, but in her niece. "Enough," she said, her voice cold. "Nkechi," she shouted, turning as the other nurse re-entered, her smirk faltering. "You think this is a game? Slandering a nurse, a dead man, for your petty hate? You've shamed me, shamed this hospital. There'll be consequences, family or not." Nkechi paled, her bravado crumbling. "Auntie, out," Missy Si snapped, pointing to the door. Nkechi fled, the room erupting in murmurs as Missy Si turned to Adwoa, her tone gentler. "I'm sorry, Adwoa. This ends now." Adwoa nodded, her tears falling unchecked, relief warring with the ache in her chest. The truth was safe, but the damage lingered, her grief now a battlefield, stained by Nkechi's malice. The storm of Nkechi's rumors settled into an uneasy calm at St. Mary's Hospital, though the echoes lingered in sidelong glances and hushed whispers. Adwoa pressed on, her grief for Chief Owusu a quiet ache she carried beneath her uniform, her hands steady as she tended to patients. Missy Si's swift justice, Nkechi's suspension pending review, had cleared her name, but the wound remained, raw and tender. She leaned on Efua, her friend's fierce loyalty a lifeline, and threw herself into work, letting the rhythm of the ward dull the pain. A week later, on a rare day off, Adwoa lingered at the Boateng house in Teshi, the morning sun filtering through the mango tree outside. Efua and her mother had gone to the market, leaving the small home quiet save for the chatter of the younger siblings playing in the yard. Adwoa swept the living room, the broom's scrape a steady beat against the concrete floor, her mind drifting to Chief Owusu, his laugh at Labadi, the yellow shawl, his whispered, "My child." She paused, leaning on the broom, her chest tight with a longing she couldn't shake. He was gone, but he'd left a mark on her soul, a father's love reclaimed for a fleeting day. A sharp knock jolted her from her thoughts. She set the broom aside, wiping her hands on her wrapper, and opened the door. A man stood there, tall and lean, dressed in a pressed white shirt and black slacks, a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. His polished shoes gleamed against the dusty porch, and his face carried a professional calm. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth, accented with a Lagos lilt. "Are you Miss Adwoa Mensah?" Adwoa blinked, her pulse quickening. "Yes, I am," she replied, her tone wary. "Who are you?" He offered a small smile, extending a hand. "I'm attorney Samuel Adebayo. May I come in? I have something important to discuss, about Chief Owusu Dankwa." The name hit her like a gust of wind, stealing her breath. She nodded dumbly, stepping aside, her mind racing as he entered and settled on the worn sofa. She sat across from him, her hands twisting in her lap, the air thick with sudden tension. "Chief Owusu?" she echoed, her voice trembling. What about him?" Adebayo opened his satchel, pulling out a folder, his movements deliberate. "I'm here to inform you that Chief Owusu named you in his will. Before he passed, he updated it quite recently, in fact. He left you a substantial portion of his estate." Adwoa's world tilted, her ears ringing as if she'd been struck. She stared at him, her mouth parting, but no words came. A will? An estate? Her mind scrambled, grasping at the edges of his words, but they slipped through like sand. "Me?" she finally choked out, her voice a whisper. "There must be a mistake. I was his nurse." "No mistake," Adebayo said, his tone firm but kind as he slid the folder toward her. "He was clear, Adwoa Mensah, my nurse at St. Mary's. He left you farmland in the Ashanti region, a house in Takoradi, and a significant sum of money in a bank account. It's all here, legally binding. Adwoa's hands shook as she took the folder, her eyes scanning the papers, black ink on white, numbers and titles she couldn't fathom. Acres of land, a deed, a bank statement with more zeros than she'd ever seen. Her breath hitched, a cold shock flooding her veins. This can't be real, she stammered, her voice rising. Why me? He had no family, surely someone else. Adebayo leaned forward, his gaze steady. He had no one, Miss Mensah. No wife, no living children, only distant relatives who'll get their share. But you. He spoke of you often in his last days. Said you gave him something money couldn't buy, a daughter's care, a day of peace. He told me, she's the only one who saw me, not my wealth. This was his way of thanking you. Adwoa's vision blurred, tears spilling hot down her cheeks as his words sank in. She saw Chief Owusu's face, his smile at the market, his hand clutching the groundnuts, his voice calling her my child, and her chest caved, a sob breaking free. I didn't want this, she whispered, her hands clutching the folder. I didn't do it for money, I wanted him to be happy. I know, Adebayo said softly, his voice a bomb. He knew too. That's why he did this, not as payment but as a gift. He said people like you, kind, selfless, deserve blessings. He wanted you to have it, to honor what you gave him. Adwoa shook her head, her mind a storm of disbelief and guilt. Land, a house, money, it was a fortune, a life she'd never dreamed of, and yet it felt wrong, heavy. She thought of Mama's cough, Kwame's pregnant girlfriend, Efua's cramped home. Needs she could meet now, but the joy wouldn't come. I'm not worthy, she murmured, her voice cracking. I was just his nurse. Adebayo smiled, a rare warmth breaking his calm. He thought you were more, Adwoa, a daughter in spirit. Take it for him. Make it mean something. She sat there, the folder trembling in her lap, tears dripping onto the pages. The shock numbed her, a wave crashing over her grief, reshaping it into something new, gratitude, yes, but tangled with loss. She saw his eyes again, soft with thanks, and felt his absence sharper than ever. He'd given her a day, and now a legacy, a piece of his heart she'd carry forever. Thank you, she whispered, to Adebayo, to the air, to him, her voice lost in the quiet. The folder from Attorney Adebayo sat on the small table in Efua's living room for days, its edges curling in the humid Teshi air. Adwoa couldn't touch it at first, her hands hovering over the papers as if they might burn her. The weight of Chief Owusu's gift pressed on her. Land in Ashanti, a house in Takoradi, money she could barely fathom. It was a fortune, a lifeline, but it came wrapped in his absence, a bittersweet echo of their day together. She saw his face in her dreams, smiling at the market, frail but proud, and woke with tears, her heart torn between joy and sorrow. Efua found her one morning, staring at the folder, her eyes distant. Adwoa, she said, sitting beside her, her voice gentle but firm. You can't keep avoiding it. He gave this to you for a reason. What will you do? Adwoa took a shaky breath, her fingers tracing the ink of his name on the page. I don't know, Efua, she whispered. It's too much. I'm a nurse, not this. But he wanted me to have it, to help my family, to live better. I owe him that. Efua squeezed her hand, her smile warm. Then honor him, Use it the way he'd want. Make it mean something. The words sank in, a seed taking root in Adwoa's grief. She thought of Mama's cough, Kwame's unborn child, Efua's cramped home, needs she could meet now, burdens she could lift. And slowly, the guilt ebbed, replaced by a quiet, burning gratitude. Chief Owusu had seen her, really seen her, and given her a chance to repay the kindness she'd known from others. She nodded, her resolve hardening. You're right, she said, her voice steadier. I'll make it good for him. Her first step was a visit to his grave. A week later, under a late afternoon sky streaked with pink and gold. The cemetery outside Accra was quiet, rows of stones stretching into the distance, the air thick with the scent of earth and fading flowers. She carried a small bouquet of artichokes, their purple heads vibrant against the gray marble of his headstone. She knelt, laying them gently before his name, Owusu Dankwa, 1951 to 2025, and let her tears fall, soft and unhurried. Thank you, Dad, she whispered, her voice trembling with reverence. I didn't expect this, any of it. You gave me a day, then a life I never dreamed of. I'm not sure I deserve it, but I'll use it right. For Mama, for Kwame, for everyone you helped me see. I'll never forget you. She pressed her palm to the stone, feeling its coolness, and smiled through her tears. A promise sealed in gratitude. Back in Teshi, she sat with Efua's family that night, the folder open on the table. Papa Kofi, Mama Abina, and the children gathered close, their eyes wide as she explained. He left me enough to help you too, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You took me in when I had nothing, your home, your food, your love. I want to build you a bigger place with a shop for Mama Abina's wache. It's the least I can do. Mama Abina's hands flew to her mouth, tears glistening. Adwoa, no, you don't have to. I want to. Adwoa cut in, her smile firm. You're my family now. He'd want this, helping the ones who helped me. Papa Kofi nodded, his weathered face softening, and Efua hugged her tight, her laughter a balm against the lingering ache. For her own family, she sent money to Kumasi, enough for Mama's medicine, Kwame's wedding, and a small house where they could live together again. She called Mama that evening, her voice breaking as she shared the news. We're okay now, Mama, she said, tears streaming. No more worrying, he gave us this. Oh, Adwoa, Mama sobbed, her voice faint but full. My child, you're blessed. Thank him for me, wherever he is. I will, Adwoa promised, her heart swelling with a love that spanned miles and memories. She didn't stop there. Back at St. Mary's, she kept nursing, her hands as steady as ever, her smile a quiet tribute to the man who'd changed her. But she dreamed bigger now. With Efua's help, she opened a flower stall near Makola Market, artichokes and roses spilling over the wooden stand, a nod to the day that bound her to him. Then came a small eatery in OSU, serving jollof rice and tilapia, its walls painted yellow like the shawl he'd loved. Each venture bore his spirit, simple joys he'd taught her to cherish, and the profits grew, a steady stream she shared with those she'd vowed to lift. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she stood outside the eatery, the smell of frying fish drifting through the air. Efua joined her, her arm around Adwoa's shoulders, and they watched the city hum, trot roast rattling, hawkers calling, life pulsing on. You've done it, Adwoa, Efua said, her voice proud. He'd be smiling now, eh? Adwoa nodded, her eyes tracing the horizon where the sky met the sea. I hope so, she murmured, her chest full. He gave me more than money, Efua, he showed me what matters. Kindness, family, giving back. I'll live it every day. For him. She felt him then, a whisper in the breeze, his gruff laugh, his steady gaze, and her gratitude deepened, a root that anchored her to the woman she'd become. Chief Owusu was gone, but his legacy lived in her hands, her heart, and the lives she touched, a circle of love unbroken by time.